Thank you for joining us. The Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for State Auditor. I'm glad we got the technical problems worked out. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor, and I will let the other editorial board members introduce themselves. Ben?
Ben Campbell. I'm the publisher of the Columbian and editorial board member.
And Scott?
Scott Campbell, former publisher of the Columbian, and I'm still on the Columbian Editorial Board.
And then Callie?
Hi, I'm Callie Hare. I cover politics for the Columbian, and I'll be covering about this meeting, but I won't be participating or asking questions.
And then as mentioned earlier, we are recording this. We'll post it unedited on our website and our YouTube page. And now we'll give the candidates take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you're running for this position. Then we'll move on to specific policy questions. And we'll start with Chris.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for having me today. I'm Chris Leyba. Apologize, I'm parked on the side of the road. I got off work a little early today to be here to talk to you. So I am a police officer. I've been a police officer and a detective for the last 11 years, currently with King County Sheriff's Office, previously with Seattle Police Department. And I spent about 3 years in the Seattle Police Department, actually as a law enforcement auditor. So when the consent decree started in Seattle with the U.S. Department of Justice, I was brought up and actually sent down to LAPD to become certified by an organization called ILEA as a law enforcement performance auditor. When I came back, we were responsible for the audits that directly related to proving the consent decree stipulations were being satisfied with the U.S. Department of Justice, but I was also responsible for checking other internal controls and processes in the agency, such as property management, narcotics tracking, confidential informant information, so on and so forth. The basic reason that I'm running for this position is I believe, I mean, myself and the incumbent have pretty much a polar opposite philosophy on how we think audits, what we think audits should do as far as proactive versus reactive. Just a different mindset, different school of thought. I believe that proactively looking at high-risk processes and keeping internal controls in agencies honest up front prevents bad actors from taking advantage of them. And ultimately, I think we can avoid a lot of problems by doing that. I think that's a culture shift that will happen under my leadership in this office, and that would primarily be the reason I believe I hopefully will earn your vote in November.
Great, thank you. And Pat?
Well, I am currently your Washington State Auditor, and I have been serving in this position for the last 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was the Pierce County Executive, elected to 2 terms in that capacity. First woman in both of these 2 seats, to have held these 2 seats. Prior to that, I was the Pierce County Auditor and was elected to 2 terms. And way a long time ago, when my kids were little, I served 2 terms on the Tacoma School Board. So I have a long record of public service, of leadership, of accomplishments, and I am looking forward to wanting to carry on in this office. I'm most proud of the interactive, user-friendly website that we created. We have a plethora of information on the State Auditor's web, what we have available in the State Auditor's office, and we've created a really wonderful user-friendly website for the citizens at large, for the for legislators, for decision makers, and for many stakeholders who are interested in knowing how their governments are using their tax dollars. I'm proud of the tools we've created. One we call the FIT tool, which is a financial intelligence tool that lets you do some comparisons between one governmental entity with another. We have consistency in the state of Washington because we have a BARS manual, which is a budget accounting manual that we manage and we have created in the State Auditor's Office. I'm also proud of the work that we've done to get more money into the State Auditor's Office to do more performance audits, in particular cybersecurity audits, which is so critically important, and to get more money to do accountability audits, which are compliance audits. Are you following the rules, the procedures, the laws, the policies that you have. I'm seeking re-election because I want to continue this good work. Right now, I have 400 employees. I used to say sprinkle in 15 offices sprinkled across the state of Washington. We have a great team down there in the Vancouver area. But now I say we have 400 offices because we were not caught flat-footed and could go to teleworking even before the governor mandated it. I want to expand our cybersecurity work. We have a backlog of entities, whether they're local governments or state agencies that want us to come in and do that body of work. I've created a multidisciplinary team looking at Medicaid fraud, and I want to continue that work. And then now, of course, to help the agency.
Okay. And Pat, I'm sorry, we'll get on to some of the specifics later,
okay.
but thank you.
Okay.
We'll start with, obviously, there are going to be a lot of questions about the pandemic and its impact on local governments, on state government. Chris, what role do you see the auditor's office playing, and how do you think that role will be changed by the pandemic?
Well, the vast majority of your local and county governments are going to have the same deficit that the state government is going to have, in some cases a lot worse. And what we're going to be doing at a county and local level is there's going to be a lot of very tough decisions made as far as budgeting. The state auditor's office is going to obviously have to keep doing oversight of the way that those financial responsibilities of those local governments is conducted. But if there's any way we can do our part to kind of give them a break necessarily, obviously that's important. One of the biggest fundamental changes I would like to see in our office right now, Washington is pretty much the only state where this office not only gets to set the audit schedule, but actually gets to set the audit rate for all the governments in the state. So a lot of local governments and county governments I've talked to on the campaign have said we're basically forced to do an audit based on how much money we make in this city or revenue we spend in this city, and we don't get to choose how much that costs. A lot of other audit models out there allow for contracted CPAs, and actually statutorily we do as well. I would like to see an expansion of that program, perhaps allowing more contract CPA work to be ordered by the local and county governments to save them money. From there, we would do meta auditing of those. We could take a statistically significant sample of those audits, run them through meta audits just to make sure that those private firms are maintaining the standards we set. And ultimately, that will allow these agencies to save money. We will still maintain good accountability and good financial oversight of these agencies. But at the same time, that will also open us up to reducing our budget if the governor ultimately decides my office will need to reduce budget. But also, if we don't get to that point, it'll allow me to rebalance and get more of an audit calendar moving through state government agencies, some of which go 4 or 5+ years without a regular rotation of audits. So that would be one thing I think we could do really well for local government.
And I want to check, Chris, do you know what is the budget for the state auditor's office?
It was up about 16 million. I think it's at about $111 million now. So it was up after last year. Obviously, we have one more year of the biennial. I did notice that FTEs are looking like they're going to be down, whether that's vacancies or that's just lowering the overall responsibilities of the office. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but I do believe that we had a very good day on the revenue projections. Obviously, it's a lot better than I think we thought it was going to be coming out of the governor's office. But I still believe all these agencies are going to be taking somewhat of a cut, and we need to start looking for ways to do that and do it in a way that doesn't ultimately cut the primary function of the office, which is the oversight.
And Pat, first of all, is that accurate on the budget for the office?
Yeah, it's approximately that. That's the budget. But remember, we're a billable rate organization, so we're very different than a lot of state agencies. So we do bill our clients, but we are the most competitive. There's not a CPA firm that charges as low as we do in the state auditor's office. We are statutorily required to audit every local government and every state agency in the state of Washington, and we've been doing this for 130 years. I often say if you've met one state auditor, you've met one state auditor. We all do something a little bit different, but we have a really good history of doing auditing of at this point, before the pandemic, of about $113 billion that we examine, whether they're federal, state, or local. Now more than ever, we don't step away. We cannot step away from the work that we do in the state auditor's office. We're post auditors. That's what we do. That's what the law requires us to do, is to go in and look at local governments or state agencies to see how they have managed the financial monies that they've gotten from the public. So we do that through the financial audits. We audit on a regular basis large entities every year, and we audit them in multiple ways, because we don't just do financial audits. We do accountability audits, as I mentioned. We do performance audits, we do cybersecurity audits, and we do investigations. We do fraud investigations, and we do whistleblowers if they're state employees. And even if we did use a CPA firm or allowed an entity, let's say hospital districts, to be able to use a CPA firm, we still have to review that work. We are required to do that. I know that local governments, I come out of local governments, have been struggling through the pandemic, and state agencies have. But it doesn't mean that we step away from the work that we do that provides that accountability and that transparency. I sit on a number of task force at the federal level with my colleagues across the country, state auditors, comptrollers, treasurers across the country, looking at the rules and the procedures that are coming out of the feds and how those are being implemented in the state of Washington. And we are in the billions of dollars of additional dollars that are coming to local governments, some directly to those local governments, or going through the state Department of Commerce through grant requests. And so we need to be doing this work, and we will continue to do this work. And it is, while, you know, local governments, nobody ever wants to pay their auditor. It's important work, and we need to continue to do that. And there's value for those local entities to have an outside, independent, objective set of eyes to look at the books and what they're doing. We can't tell them how to spend the money. What we can do is we can review how they have managed that money and the accountability they have for that money.
So do you foresee any staffing reductions or budget cuts when we come through this?
We did immediately. I created a financial team within SAO, the State Auditor's Office, and to review the things that we could do. We did COLA reductions for all exempt employees, and myself included, even though I can't automatically do it. I have to do it by giving a donation, and that's what I've done to the Outer Bank, which is a woman's nonprofit that helps women and children. But so we did that. We put our contract on hold. We also did no new hires unless they were mission critical. We still have a churn in the state auditor's office. We still have people that leave and go to governments or state agencies. So we do need to keep our staffing at a certain level to be able to accomplish the things that we have that we're required to do. And so, but we have put in place many different strategies in which to tighten our belt as well in the state auditor's office without negatively impacting us being able to accomplish some of that work. There are a couple performance audits we've pushed out till a little bit of next year. So it gives us the capacity to do the additional work that we're doing for the Employment Security Department. So.
Okay. Now, Chris, when you talk about being more proactive, what exactly does that mean?
Well, you know, you go in, you know, as McCarthy mentioned, we do have the ability to do performance auditing in this state, and that came out of Initiative 900, obviously. And the whole reason that the voters overwhelmingly supported that was that they wanted more. They wanted to know that there was less waste and true efficiency in how we're using our money. Now, yes, performance auditing is only one aspect of the state auditor's office, but in terms of accountability auditing as well, you know, going back to this balance between, trying to get more of a regular rotation with some of the larger agencies on accountability auditing. Obviously, you go back 8 years, the recession hit pretty hard and cut the accountability audit budget way down. But up until the pandemic, we were slowly starting to recover that. For example, we have one accountability audit of the Employment Security Department in 2017. Now, I understand they were about ready to close out one for 2019 and chose not to after everything blew up. But in 2016, there were $600 and something thousand worth of improper payments by ESD to Washington State prisoners. In 2017, they did note that there were some improvements, but clearly, if you have an agency like that that is, in my opinion, either failing or barely passing their accountability audits, there's good reason to look at them more often. And I really do have to wonder that if we had been regularly performing annual accountability audits on ESD, if we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now, especially with things as elementary as what was reported today by KREM about, there were their own employees inside of ESD had fraudulent claims filed, and they were employed by ESD. So that's what I mean by being more proactive. Obviously, you can't catch everything, but my philosophy and my experience auditing has been there are very few bad people, very few bad actors. There are bad processes that do allow bad people to take advantage of them. If you can catch those bad processes or catch internal controls breaking down before they do, you can prevent things from going wrong and having to clean up the mess later.
Pat, does your office do that? Will it increase the schedule to try and catch things ahead of time?
Let's talk about the Employment Security Department, because I'm very aware of what we've done and what we're planning to do and what we're actually in actual action doing with the ESD. We do audit the ESD, and we have audited them, and we have come up with findings of the ESD to give them instructions. Now, remember, we can't force governments to do with the recommendations that we give them after we audit them. If they've done something illegal, then we work with the AG's office or local prosecutors, if it's local government, to actually go after them if they've done something illegal. But if they have had a lack of internal controls, which is many times what we find, not in multiple entities, we will give them that the recommendations, and they have to implement them. Now, having said that, when I was first elected 4 years ago, I felt, well, we didn't have enough teeth. So we did get legislation changed. We worked with a Republican legislator out of Pierce County, quite frankly, Randy Becker, on a piece of legislation that allows, that requires, if you're a state agency, and this is just for state agencies, that if you have a finding, you have to not only provide the recourse and what the plan is that you're going to do to rectify that, the timeline, et cetera, to the legislature, to the governor's office, to my office. So we got good legislation that gives a little bit more teeth, but quite frankly, we're relying on those local entities and state agencies to do what we're asking them to do. Now, as far as the ESD, we were doing an accountability audit, which is a compliance audit of that ESD for 2019, because remember, we're post auditors, but we kept it open when the fraud happened, because we felt that we needed to extend that accountability. We also gave some room to the feds to come in and look at the fraud cases. We didn't want to be another entity within the ESD to impede the ability for the ESD to actually get out those payments to those unemployment payments. But what we did do is we convened our group of teams, and we're using 3 teams to work on doing 3 additional audits of the ESD. One to look at the increased number of, let me see, I want to get it exactly accurate, to look at the large scale benefits fraud. So we're going to look at that on the large scale, to look at what the delays of the payments were, and to look at the lack of responsiveness of the ESD to people's inquiries. So we've expanded our review of the ESD because of the extent of the large fraud to look at those areas. And so we will come up with a report, one of the reports by the end of the year, but not until early next year when we have a final accounting and the performance audit that we're going to be doing. So we're doing a performance audit, we're doing the single audit, we're doing the state audit, we're doing an IT security audit. So those are the audits that we're doing of the Employment Security Department.
So I'm curious, Chris, with your experience working with police departments and with the consent decree, how does that differ from the role of the state auditor?
Well, in many ways, it was the same. We didn't have the actual authority to go into any particular organization that we were auditing and basically force them to make changes. We were a direct report. I guess the parallel in that case, we were a direct report to the chief, whereas your state auditor is a direct report to the voters. What we did have the ability to do, though, is be very public about how we issued findings. And if we felt that a certain unit wasn't going to be particularly compliant or responsive to the recommendations we had, we could basically have, through our chain of command, go directly to the judge and let them know what was going on. And in that case, it put a lot more pressure on it. So there are a lot of parallels. Obviously, what we're doing in the state auditor's office is much more heavily financial. We were doing more procedural and property integrity management in law enforcement auditing, but the overall structure is very similar.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. Now, Pat, when you were elected, it was a chaotic time for the office. And previous auditor, Troy Kelly, was facing criminal charges not related to his job, to his performance. How was the transition, and how would you assess your job with the department in reorganizing?
I think it's been fabulous, and I love this job. And I will tell you that it was incumbent upon me to go out, and I kind of use the term proselytize, but go out and talk about the state auditor's office to the general public and to local governments, to develop a relationship, because the relationship with the legislators, whether it was the House or the Senate, whether it was Democrats or Republicans, was really fractured with the state auditor's office because of my predecessor. And so I needed to build relationships, and that's really important. And that's indicative of the success that we've had with the fact that the state legislature has provided money every year since I've been state auditor into our budget. And we've had support from both sides of the aisle in both houses. So I'm very proud of that work. The other thing I think is important is, like I said, we had a plethora of information, but if you would have been hard pressed to find that information on our website. So for the general public, we needed a user-friendly, interactive website, and I'm proud of the work that we've done with that. And I will tell you that when you talk about being held accountable and that transparency and the ability of the public to look at those tax dollars, we put a tool on our website called Tracker, and that allows you to actually track the findings of local governments and state agencies and see what the activities they have done with regards to the findings, which is the most severe thing that we can give a local government and state agency as a finding. But I'm proud of the work that we've done to be able to allow the public to really see their government at work, to look at those financial records, to look at whether they are sustainable financially, to do some comparisons. All of that is really good work that I've done over the course of the last 3 years. There's a whole bunch of other things. We've built up the cybersecurity department. We've created what we call innovations in government to give tools in their toolbox, like guidelines for how you do segregation of duties. You're a small little cemetery district. How do you give segregation of duties? How do you do those activities? So we've done a number of things that we've provided tools for local governments to be better, because our goal is to increase trust in government. And we do that through our accountability and transparency. But I will say this, that the media helps us get that message out. Not everybody is running to the state auditor's office as much as I want them to. They don't go running to that. They really do. We do rely on the media to help tell our story, and they've done a great job. Unfortunately, 2019 was a tough year for Washington State. We had a lot of significant frauds that occurred in Washington State, some big frauds in local governments in particular. And in fact, we have one in Quita down in Vancouver.
Well, and let me move on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Chris, how would you assess the job that the office is doing? One, in recovering from the previous auditor, and two, the website things that Pat mentioned.
You want me to specifically talk about those two things?
Yes. Yeah. How would you assess the job her office is doing? How would you do it better?
Well, again, I think it comes down to an issue of culture. First of all, AS1s, entry-level auditors, are getting 3 days of training and then being thrown directly into auditing. As a law enforcement officer, I go through 2 years before I'm allowed to do that alone. And obviously, there's a lot more high-risk life safety stakes in that. But I think we could do a little bit better preparing those guys for what they're ultimately coming up against. Because, again, from my experience talking to the various county auditors around the state, they don't feel a lot of those entry-level people are very well prepared, and that might explain the average 22% turnover. The other thing, I will say that obviously the Troy Kelly situation was nobody's fault, and certainly not Auditor McCarthy's fault. I think the integrity of the office is obviously higher. We don't have somebody going to federal prison running the state auditor's office anymore. So obviously that was a great thing. But I do believe, and I'll go back one more time to this. I do believe that if we had a culture of proactivity, citizens would like that better. And I'll give you a quick example. You can look it up. Go to the 2019 Missouri State Auditor's Employment Security Audit on their brand new software. And, Nicole Galloway, the state auditor, her team found issues with that. Lo and behold, Missouri is in the bottom third of states that were affected by these massive cyber fraud incidents related to employment security this year. That's what I mean by proactive. If we're more proactive, we can avoid these messes up front. I completely respect the career of Pat McCarthy. I don't have any personal issue with her. I think this is just voters have to decide, do we want proactive or reactive moving forward?
Sure.
Chris, question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
So if you would point more toward a proactive approach on that, does that mean you'd have to abandon some reactive auditing? I mean, or would you need more resources to cover both bases?
Not at all, because again, what we will do is we will shift the ability, again, which we have the statutory authority to do this. We will shift the ability for local governments and county governments to be more flexible about who does their audits. We will be doing statistically significant sample meta auditing of those audits, and that will allow us to focus more on a regular basis on state level auditing. As far as performance auditing go, that specific category, I think performance auditing is the best way we can shift to more of a proactive approach. And with the performance auditing, if you go look at the original language of I-900 and actually the preface of every Brian Sontag audit report on the website, you'll see that the intent was to look at the highest risk, most expensive governments first. We have a lot of very, very expensive government agencies that have had problems in the last 4 years. I basically would just leave it to the voters to decide. Go look at the performance audits that have been done in the last 4 years and ask yourself, was this the intent of what we voted for in I-900? Is this the kind of proactive government we want, or do we maybe want certain other agencies looked at with more expediency?
Pat, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, if I want to defend or at least talk about our performance audits, I'm very proud of many performance audits that we've done since I've been state auditor, and I'll just rattle off a few. We've done some that have been extremely valuable, I think, to local governments and state agencies. We did one on the UW School of Dentistry that was, rife with problems, financial problems, personnel issues, and the like. Their services. So we did a performance audit on the UW School of Dentistry. We did one on school nutrition and school homelessness and school K-12 of the 295 school districts in the state of Washington on school vaccinations, on school security and safety. We did one on pretrial services, which, as a former county executive in Pierce County with the regional jail, was a really valuable report that we did. So we did one on the Walla Watershed, which was an entity that was created by the legislature 10 years ago, and basically the report says that it hasn't accomplished what the goals of the watershed were intended to were created for. We did one on sound transit. We did a number of them. We're doing one right now on a cultural audit on fish and wildlife with some of the sexual harassment that has happened with that agency. We're doing a two-phase process right now on ballot rejection rates that was raised as a concern. And we're doing, on our work plan, we're going to do one on the Washington State Patrol rape kits. So we're doing a really significant across the board performance audits. Some have financial ramifications. We've done a lot of reports to look at the Port of Seattle, who was giving a gift of public funds, basically, or giving the money to their employees for a bonus, if you will, which is illegal for them to do. We've done one on the Pierce County Housing Authority, a fraud case that we found by one of our really good young auditors, that this woman had stolen basically $7 million from that Pierce County Housing Authority. So a number of things we've done, both on fraud, both on whistleblowers, and on our performance audit. So I'm very proud of the work that we are doing, and we're going to continue to do really good work in the next 4 years as well.
Scott, did you have a follow-up on that?
No.
Okay, I'm curious. Chris, you're running as a Republican. Pat, you're running as a Democrat. Should this be a partisan office? And really quick, I don't want to get too deep into that, but Chris, what are your thoughts?
No, and in fact, I'm the only candidate that has already talked to the legislature, and I have at least one state representative that's going to drop a bill on day one to make it nonpartisan 4-year term. I understand that if you're a senator or you're a governor candidate, people are looking for very specific party platforms that you're supposed to be running on. That's great. There's no such thing as a Republican or Democrat audit, and that is evidenced by the good work with all of our county auditors around the state who are Republicans and Democrats. My personal philosophy is I think government overall right now has a really tough time with representing the people that didn't vote for you after the fact, and I think having this as a nonpartisan office makes it look more objective and really hammers it home that we are working for everyone. It is a 2/3 majority vote in the House, Senate, plus a vote of the people, so it is an uphill battle. But I personally believe it's a battle to be fought.
Sure. Pat, your thoughts?
I think the key word that my opponent said is look. It's going to look more nonpartisan. I think what you need to look at is you look at elected people who are currently elected, who have held office, like myself, who have served the entire community, whether it's all of Pierce County or whether it's the state of Washington. You know, I really feel like it's almost a red herring. I think people think there's a perception, but when you drill down, even if you look at the candidates who are running right now in nonpartisan positions, you can just look at who their supporters are and know where they fall. I think it's very transparent. I'm a Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I treat everyone that I serve as a servant leader, and the state auditor's office or the county executive. I serve all of the people that are under my purview, and I have a record of doing that. I have a good relationship, like I said, with both sides of the aisle, and so I think in the spirit of being able to model that transparency, I don't see a problem with it. However, now having said all that, we are living in a hyper-partisan world today, and it's unfortunate because, quite frankly, even our state legislature, while they may have different opinions and different strategies and different ideas of how to solve problems, they do come together and create legislation. And unfortunately, we don't see that at the federal level, but at the local level and at the state level, while there may be disagreements, they do come together, and it's the variety of those opinions that really make good legislation at the end of the day, in my humble opinion. So I think it's more of a red herring.
With that, we'll move on. Give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements you'd like to share. We'll start with Chris.
Sure. So I have 22, almost 23 of our 39 county parties on the Republican side. I've been able to get the endorsement of the Washington Farm Bureau, former governor candidate Dino Rossi, a whole treasure trove. But you know, my big thing with this office is if you are concerned, obviously the state auditor is not the governor's race. Not everybody is utterly fixated on it. If you live in a town or a county, go talk to your county auditor. Go talk to the accounting department in your local government and ask them what they know about the state auditor. Ask them, you know, especially the ones that have been around for 12 to 15 years, back to the days of Brian Sontag. What is your opinion? How do you think, is it getting better? Is it getting worse, or is it staying the same? And then make an informed opinion. I think everybody needs to be very careful about voting every individual race down their ballot and looking for the person whose mindset and whose overall cultural goals match yours the best. I think if people voted that way more often, I think government would work better. I do truly believe that what it's going to come down to in this race is, do we want someone who's going to be more proactive and more forward-thinking about trying to stop problems, or not? And that's just what I would challenge the voters to do.
Great, thank you. And Pat? I
too think it'd be great for you to ask your financial auditors what they think of the state auditor's office. I would be like, we survey everyone that we audit, so we hear back from them all regularly, and we give them the opportunity to do that. This is not a position that has somebody in it that has never held public office. I like to say governing or legislating is not for the faint of heart anymore. These are tough jobs, and you need proven leadership. You need a proven record of what it takes to run a state governmental entity. And I have done that. I have done that prior to this position, and I've done that in the last 3.5 years, and I'm proud of the work that we've done. I think it's important that we're going to have to work through this pandemic. When I was elected Pierce County executive initially, we were in the depths of the recession, and we did not go out to a vote of the people to ask for more money to balance our budget, and we had to make lots and lots of budget cuts and staffing cuts. And then I was reelected as we were clawing our way out of that recession. I have that experience to be able to help lead this organization, as I have for the last 6 months, through this pandemic and out of it. You know, hopefully it's not going to be, the timeline seems to keep moving, right? We thought it was going to be like spring break, and then it wasn't spring break. And then it was like, okay, now we're into it for the whole summer. And now we're into it for the fall and through the end of the year. As I've told my staff, plan on teleworking for all intents and purposes till the end of the year, and then we will reassess whether we have a safe plan for people to come into the offices that we have. But this is going to be a change for us. There's going to be a new normal for all of us in government, and we need people with proven experience, and that's what I bring to this position. It's been an honor for me to be serving in this position. I have a plethora of people that have endorsed me and support me, and organizations. I'm very proud of all of that. Go to my website at www.patmccarthyauditor.com, and you will get all that information that you would want to have. But it's really important that this office is able to continue to do the work. I would not farm out our work that we do as this independent, objective, state elected, separately elected entity that served us well for the last 130 years to giving it that work to private CPA firms. Government auditing is different, and we do have some CPA firms that do some government auditing, but it's like I said, we still review and are required to review all of their work. I'm proud of the talent we have in our office. We don't just have auditors, we have scientists, we have tech experts, we have cybersecurity experts, we have a cultural anthropologist, we have statisticians, we have a number of different professional backgrounds that serve in the state auditor's office that work very hard to provide that transparency and accountability to the public we all serve.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to both of you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Take care. Bye.